Greetings, Lore Masters. Tonight, our chronicle digs deep beneath the golden veneer of the lands between, past the glorious Erd Tree and into the cold, damp soil at its roots. We are looking for a face, a grotesque, silver-eyed face that haunts the depths of Stormveil Castle, a silent, sprawling cancer that taints the very world. Tonight we explore the story of Godwyn the Golden, and why his fate, a fate worse than mere death, is the single greatest tragedy in all of Elden Ring. Let's be honest, most of us in the lands between are just trying to find a site of grace before a giant lobster decides we look like a snack, so it's easy to miss the profound sadness that underpins the entire world. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And for our little community ritual, please post your location and local time in the comments. It's always fascinating to see where in the world you're all listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Before the rot, before the madness, before the endless bloody warfare, there was a golden age. It's hard to imagine looking at the crumbling ruins of Lendel or the festering swamps of Caelid, but there was a time when the lands between were united under a single brilliant faith. The Erd Tree was not just a symbol, it was a vibrant living reality, its grace touching every corner of the realm. At the heart of this age was Queen Marika the Eternal, vessel of the Elden Ring, a god-queen of impossible beauty and unfathomable will. She had established her Golden Order, a new doctrine of reality, and with her consort Godfrey, the first Elden Lord, she carved out an empire. And like any good monarchs, they had children, demigods, beings of immense power, each a facet of the new age. But among them, one stood supreme. He was the first, the heir, the exemplar. He was Godwyn the Golden. He was, in every sense of the word, perfect. In the age of the Erd Tree, Godwyn was its brightest leaf. He was the son of Marika at her zenith and Godfrey at his most potent, a union of godhood and warrior king strength. This lineage is a core in-game fact. He was a pure-blood demigod of the New Order, untainted by Carian sorcery or giant's blood. He was the poster boy for the Golden Order, the living proof that Marika's way was the right way. When the people of the lands between looked at Godwyn, they didn't just see a prince, they saw the promise of the Erd Tree made manifest. He was handsome, valiant, a warrior without peer, and by all accounts, utterly devoted to his mother and the order she had built. He was the kid in the royal family who did everything right, while his eventual half-siblings would be complicated, what with Malenia's rot, Miquella's eternal childhood, Radahn's gravity magic obsession, Rykard's unique appetites, and Ranni's lunar brooding. Godwyn was just golden. He was the high school quarterback, prom king, and valedictorian all rolled into one divine package. It's almost comical how flawless his public image was. He was the golden child in the most literal sense, and as any of us with siblings know, that kind of perfection casts a very long shadow. We know so little about his actual personality, which has led to a fierce community debate. Was Godwyn genuinely this beacon of virtue, or was this a carefully constructed image? We have no dialogue from him, no letters, no candid moments. We only have the eulogies. We have the praise heaped upon him, the monuments built to him. Many fans theorise that Godwyn the Golden was a role, a mask he was born to wear as the first son of a new dynasty. He was the flawless, smiling, beautiful tool of Marika's dominion. His perfection wasn't a personality trait, it was a political necessity. It's a sobering thought, that this figure of ultimate tragedy may have already been a prisoner of his own image long before his death, but his title held a deeper, more secret meaning. An obscure lore tidbit found in the Golden Epitaph sword description reads, "O, Lord of the Sun, O, Lord of Gold, we grasp at thy traces bloody and bold." Before the Golden Order became so rigid, before the sun became a slightly heretical concept associated with the old dragons or the giants, Godwyn held this solar association. He was the son of the Golden Order, radiating its power, its warmth, and its unyielding judgment. He was the champion who would lead his mother's armies, the one who would face down the enemies of the Erd Tree. This perfection, this golden boy status is the entire point. His story is not just a fall, it is a fall from the absolute highest, brightest, most gilded peak imaginable. He was the living embodiment of the Order's triumph, its unassailable strength. He was the son every parent dreams of, the leader every soldier would die for, the prince every subject adored. He was in essence too perfect to exist in a world as cynical as ours, and as it turns out, too perfect to exist in the lands between. This flawless prince, this paragon of the Golden Order, was not just a politician or a pretty face. He was the chief warrior of the New Age, and his greatest test, the very war that would ironically seal his ultimate fate, was the conflict against the most ancient and powerful beings in the realm, aside from the outer gods themselves, the ancient dragons. This war would define him, it would earn him his greatest friend, and it would set the stage for the jealousy and conspiracy that would bring him down. To understand the tragedy, we must first accept his perfection. We must accept his glory. He was untouchable. He was the sun itself. The entire catastrophe of Elden Ring, the very shattering, the spreading corruption, the living death. It all hinges on one simple, terrifying fact. The brighter the light, the darker the shadow it casts. Godwyn had to be everything to the Golden Order so that when he fell, he could be reduced to absolute nothing, and in that nothingness he would become a new, terrible something. This Golden Champion, this Solar Prince, was forged in the crucible of his mother's greatest war, the war against the ancient dragons. It's easy to forget, wandering the quiet ruins of Farum Azula, that these stone-scaled beasts were the masters of the lands between long before Marika ever set foot there. They were timeless, powerful, and worshipped their own outer god, a god that was sealed away, leaving their king, the twin-headed dragon lord Fortissax, to wait for its return in the heart of a storm beyond time. When Marika and her Golden Order arrived, a clash was inevitable. The Erdtree claimed the land, but the dragons ruled the sky. It was a war for the very definition of reality. And at the head of Marika's armies naturally was Godwyn the Golden. He was the divine general, the embodiment of the Order's might, and he led the charge against the ancient lords of the sky. This war was not a simple skirmish. It was an apocalypse. We see the scars of it plastered across Lindell itself. That core in-game fact, the colossal, petrified corpse of the dragon Grandsax draped over the city ramparts, is the greatest trophy of that war. Grandsax, a beast of unimaginable size, nearly brought the capital to its knees. The attack was so devastating, it became the only time in history Lindell's walls were ever breached, and it was Godwyn who led the defence. It was Godwyn who slew the colossal beast, or at least repelled it, breaking the back of the dragon assault and cementing his legend. This victory alone would have been enough to secure his place in history. But what happened next is what truly defines Godwyn's character. He wasn't just a brute, he wasn't a zealot driven by a simple kill all dragons dogma. After the main conflict, he faced the most formidable of the remaining dragon warriors, the mighty Fortissax. We aren't told the details of their battle, or if there even was one. What we're told is a truly obscure lore tidbit, one that reframes the entire conflict. It's found in the description of the incantation, Fortissax's lightning spear. It states, "In the war against the ancient dragons, Godwyn the Golden, youngest of the demigods, forged a bond of friendship with the ancient dragon Fortissax, who was the mightiest of his kin." Let that sink in. At the height of a genocidal war, the chief general of the Golden Order and the mightiest warrior of the dragons became friends. This is the ultimate "can we be friends?" moment. Like your cat finally deciding the new puppy isn't a demon, just on a geopolitical divine scale. This singular act of reconciliation ended the war. It didn't just end in a bitter truce, it ended in an alliance. Because of Godwyn's friendship, the dragon cult was absorbed into the Golden Order. This is why we find dragon-worshipping knights in Lindell. This is why the Erdtree's faith has incantations that call upon the red lightning of the dragons. It was Godwyn who bridged the gap. He was a conqueror. Yes, but he was also a uniter, a diplomat, a being capable of empathy beyond the rigid dogma of his mother's religion. This, of course, has sparked a major community debate. Was this friendship genuine, or was it a cold, calculated political move by Marika? The political theory suggests Marika, the ultimate pragmatist, saw the dragons were too powerful to be completely exterminated. So she sent her perfect, charismatic son to make a deal, to absorb their strength into her own order, effectively neutralizing them as a threat by making them allies. In this version, Godwyn is still the perfect tool, the dutiful son. But the other theory, the one that feels more poignant, is that the bond was real. That Godwyn, in the heat of battle, saw a kindred spirit in Fortissax. He saw a noble warrior, an equal, and he chose peace over dogma. He defied the expected path of pure conquest, and in doing so proved he was more than just his mother's puppet. This interpretation makes what happens next infinitely more tragic. This friendship wasn't just a footnote, it had profound, devastating consequences. Because when Godwyn was afflicted by the curse mark of death, when his soul was murdered and his body was left to fester, Fortissax did not abandon him. This is the heartbreaking detail. The remembrance of the Lich Dragon tells us that Fortissax, this legendary ancient dragon, was a friend of Godwyn. He sought to ward off the encroaching death within Godwyn's slumbering body. Fortissax, in a desperate act of loyalty, entered Godwyn's dreams, his slumbering body, to fight the spreading corruption at its source. This mighty dragon waged a one-dragon war inside his friend's corrupted consciousness. He was trying to save Godwyn's soul, to fight off the soullessness that was consuming him. It's a level of loyalty that's almost hard to process. My friends won't always answer a text, and this dragon is literally fighting a metaphysical soul cancer in a demigod's nightmare. And he failed. The corruption, the death blight, was too strong. The battle not only failed to save Godwyn, but it twisted Fortissax himself. The noble dragon was corrupted by the very death he was fighting, slowly transforming into the terrifying Lich Dragon that we, the Tarnished, find deep within the dream, forever bound to the nightmare of his fallen friend. So Godwyn was not just the perfect prince. He was a legendary warrior who chose peace. He was a friend so true that his bond inspired an equal, world-shaking loyalty in return. He was the one demigod who proved that the Golden Order could be more than a rigid, unthinking tyranny. It could be an order that grows, absorbs, and respects others. He was the best of them. He was the living, breathing proof that the New Age could be a good one. And it was this man, this hero, this friend, who was chosen as the target for the greatest crime in history. The plot against him wasn't just an assassination, it was a violation. It was an attack on the one part of the Golden Order that was capable of true grace. His perfection, his strength, and his capacity for friendship made him the ultimate symbol. And to shatter the Golden Order, that symbol had to be utterly and completely desecrated. That desecration, that grand, world-breaking crime, was not born from a simple lust for power or a petty squabble over inheritance. It was born from something far colder, far deeper, and in its own way, just as tragic. It was a crime of theology. It was conceived in the shadowed halls of the Carian Manor, under the cold light of a distant moon, in the mind of a demigod who saw the Golden Order not as a paradise, but as a prison. It was the brainchild of Godwyn's own stepsister, the lunar princess Ranni. To understand the Knight of Black Knives, one must first understand Ranni. She was not like Godwyn. She was not a golden child. She was the daughter of Radagon, the second Elden Lord, and his first wife Rennala, the Carian Queen of the Full Moon. This makes her lineage complicated. The entire demigod family tree is less of a tree and more of a wreath, a twisted, confusing circle of step-siblings, half-siblings, and other things. Ranni was a child of two worlds, the Erdtree through her father, Radagon, and the cosmos through her mother's Carian magic, and Ranni chose the cosmos. Long before the Erdtree, the Carians and their astrologers drew power from the stars, and specifically from the dark moon, a distant, unknowable entity that is heavily implied to be its own outer god, a rival to the greater will that backed the Erdtree. Ranni was her mother's daughter, a sorcerer of prodigious skill, but she was also something more. This is a core in-game fact that changes everything. Ranni was an Empyrean. Like her half-siblings Miquella and Malenia, she was one of the chosen few, selected by the Two Fingers as a candidate to one day succeed Queen Marika, to become the new god of a new age. To most, this would be the ultimate honour. To Ranni, it was a death sentence. She looked at the Golden Order, at this rigid, unyielding faith enforced by the greater will, and she saw a tyranny of fate. She saw the Two Fingers, the unthinking, unfeeling arbiters of this power, as nothing more than divine puppeteers. She saw what this god's service had done to her family. It had stolen her father Radagon from her mother, leaving Ranni a broken-hearted shell. It demanded absolute unthinking obedience. And as an Empyrean, Ranni was destined to be its greatest, most powerful puppet. Her famous words, whispered in the gloom of her tower, tell us everything. I will not be controlled by that thing. Ranni's entire motivation was freedom, not just for herself, but for the world. She wanted to sever the leash of the outer gods, to put fate back into the hands of the individual, and she was willing to pay any price to achieve this. So, the Lunar Princess began to plot. How does one escape a divine destiny? How do you tell an all-powerful god, thanks, but no thanks? You can't just abdicate. You can't run away. The destiny was bound to her very flesh, her Empyrean body. To be free, Ranni concluded, her body had to die. But not just any death. The Golden Order, in its quest for eternity, had removed the concept of true death from the world. Souls were simply recycled by the Erd Tree. If Ranni just killed herself, her soul would be reabsorbed and the game would reset. She had to die in a way that broke the rules. She had to kill her body while preserving her soul, to cast her spirit free from its divine cage. This required a very specific, very forbidden power. It required the one thing her stepmother, Queen Marika, had sealed away at the dawn of her age: destined death. The rune of death itself. This is the obscure lore tidbit that underpins the entire plot. Marika, to achieve her eternal order, had plucked the rune of death from the Elden Ring and given it to her most loyal shadow, the beast cleric Malekith, who guarded it in the timeless sanctuary of Farum Azula. With this rune sealed, no one, not even the gods, could truly die. Immortality was enforced. Ranni's plan, therefore, was a heist. She had to steal a piece of that rune. This was a conspiracy of cosmic proportions, one she could not manage alone. She enlisted her most trusted advisors, the giant smith Iji and her half-wolf shadow, Bled. And it's strongly implied her brother Ricard, Lord of Volcano Manor, was an early co-conspirator, providing the political and military knowledge needed to pull off such a coup. But Ranni's plan had a final, horrifying component. To achieve the specific outcome she desired, the death of her body, the freedom of her soul, the ritual required a terrible balance. She couldn't just use the rune of death on herself. She had to split its power. She would use a fragment of destined death to forge a set of special weapons, the Black Knives. And on a single, terrible night, 2 demigods would be struck down. Ranni would be one of them. She would die in flesh, just as she planned, her spirit escaping to inhabit the puppet doll we find her in. But for the ritual to work, another demigod had to die at the exact same moment. This demigod would die in soul. This, right here, is the central, unavoidable tragedy. Ranni's quest for spiritual freedom was predicated on the spiritual murder of someone else. And this brings us to the most agonizing community debate of the entire story. Why Godwyn? Why did he have to be the sacrifice? He had no part in this celestial drama. He was, by all accounts, a loyal son, a brave warrior, and a true friend. The theories are numerous. Some fans believe it was purely pragmatic. Godwyn was simply the most vulnerable, or his death would cause the most chaos, which Ranni needed. Others believe Ranni and Ricard resented Godwyn, the perfect golden child, and saw him as a symbol of the order they despised. But the most compelling and tragic theory is that Godwyn was chosen because he was the one. He was the heart of the Golden Order. He was its greatest success story. To kill Godwyn was not just to kill a man, it was to kill the idea of the Golden Order. It was a symbolic theological regicide. It's the ultimate dark twist. Ranni, in her quest to free the world from one divine tyranny, employed a cold, calculating and ruthless logic that was, in its own way, just as absolute. Some even deeper theories suggest Queen Marika herself was involved, that she allowed or even aided Ranni's plot, using it as the first step in her own plan to shatter the Elden Ring. After all, the assassins were Numen, Marika's own people. How did they get so close to her favoured son without her knowledge? This theory paints Ranni as a pawn in an even bigger game. But regardless of the why, the what is what matters. Godwyn the Golden, the Solar Prince, the dragon's friend, the hero of the capital, was chosen as the sacrificial lamb. He was completely, utterly innocent. He was selected to have his soul, his very essence, annihilated, just so another could be free. He was sleeping. He had no chance to fight, no chance to defend himself, no chance to even understand why he was being erased from existence. His part in this story is not one of choice. It is not one of ambition. It is the story of a victim, targeted for his perfection and sacrifice for a cause he never knew existed. The stage was set, the conspirators were in place, and the assassins were ready to move. And so, on a frigid, starless night, they moved. This was the event that would sever history, splitting it into the before and the after. The Night of Black Knives. It was not a battle. It was a silent, synchronized, ritualistic execution. It was a masterpiece of espionage and theological violence, and it targeted the very heart of the Golden Order. The perpetrators, as we now know them, were the Black Knife Assassins. We've all been ambushed by their descendants, those ghostly, hyper-aggressive women who flip around and stab you before you can even get your shield up. That core in-game fact is our first clue. They are preternaturally skilled, imbued with a strange, shadowy power. But the originals, the ones who struck on that first night, were something else entirely. They were not mere humans. An obscure lore tidbit, found in the description of their armour, reveals their origin. The assassins that carried out the deed were all women, and rumoured to be Numen, kin to Marika herself. This changes everything. The Numen were the ancient race from which Marika hailed, a people of legendary longevity and grace who had come to the lands between from another world. This means the assassins were not random mercenaries hired by Ranni. They were Marika's own kinswomen. Why would they follow the Lunar Princess, a Carian, on a mission of high treason against their own matriarch? Or were they following Marika's orders all along? This is the dark, unsettling question that hangs over the entire event. Ranni, in her grand conspiracy, had done the impossible. She had somehow, either by stealth or by Marika's own secret blessing, stolen a fragment of destined death from the high heavens, from Malekith's very grasp. And with this fragment, she did not forge one weapon, but many. She imbued a set of daggers with the power of the Death Rune. These were the Black Knives, weapons capable of wounding and killing a god, of inflicting a true death that the Golden Order had made impossible. The plan was enacted with terrifying precision. It required 2 simultaneous murders. At the very peak of the Divine Tower of Liurnia, Ranni the Witch, the Empyrean, stood alone. She held one of these terrible, fate-breaking blades. She was ending her own divine destiny. She plunged the dagger into her Empyrean flesh, killing her own body, but in a ritual so specific that her soul was preserved, unbound, free to flee into the waiting form of a 4-armed puppet. This is the ultimate, it's not me, it's my body breakup with reality. We find her corpse there, burned and broken, a testament to the price she paid for her freedom. But at that exact same moment, miles away, in the heart of the secure golden capital of Lanedale, the other half of the ritual was completed. A squad of these Numen assassins, moving like shadows, slipped past the sentinels, past the knights, past the entire military apparatus of the most powerful city in the world. They found the sleeping form of Godwyn the Golden. This is the scene the game's own opening cinematic shows us in fleeting, nightmarish glimpses. The sleeping prince, the dark-robed figures, the glint of the black daggers. They did not just stab him. It was not a simple assassination. They were performing a ritual. They carved the curse mark of death into his back. But because the rune was fragmented, because Ranni's ritual had split its power, it did not work as intended. Or rather, it worked exactly as Ranni intended. Ranni died in body but lived in spirit. Godwyn died in spirit but lived in body. His soul, his consciousness, his personhood was annihilated, executed, utterly erased from existence. But his divine, immortal flesh, protected by the rules of the Golden Order, could not die. The Black Knives, imbued with only part of destined death, had no power over his physical form, and so, the Golden Prince, the hero of the capital, the friend of dragons, was left a soulless, breathing, undying corpse. He was the first of those who live in death. This duality, this half-death, created the Hallowbrand, the 2-part curse mark of death that would become the symbol of this entire tragic age. This, of course, has led to one of the biggest community debates in the entire lore. How did they get to Godwyn? He was the most beloved, most important demigod of the Golden Order, son of Marika and Godfrey, living in the royal capital. The security should have been absolute. Lendel's defences, which could spot a lone Tarnish trying to sneak in from a mile away, suddenly developed a massive assassin-shaped blind spot. Suspicious, just a tad. The theories are explosive. The first, and most popular, is that Queen Marika herself was the mastermind, that she wanted this, that she allowed her Numen kinswomen to strike her favoured son. Why? Perhaps she saw the Golden Order as a prison just as Ranni did. Perhaps she needed a catalyst so profound, so devastating, that it would give her the justification to do the unthinkable, to shatter the Elden Ring itself. In this theory, Godwyn was her sacrifice, the son she doomed to jumpstart her own rebellion against the greater will. The second theory points to Ranni's co-conspirator and Godwyn's half-brother, Rykard, Lord of Blasphemy. Before he became a snake god's lunch, Rykard was a cunning praetor and a political powerhouse in Lendel. It's theorized that he provided the inside information. He knew the guard patrols, the secret passages, the blind spots. He helped the assassins navigate the capital to strike his perfect golden stepbrother, all in the name of his own nascent blasphemy against the Order. A third, less common theory is that the Black Knives were just that good, aided by Ranni's sorcery, that they used their concealing veil magic to slip in and out undetected. This feels the least likely, given the divine stakes. A demigod's bedchamber isn't just protected by a few sleepy guards, it's protected by faith itself. Whichever theory you subscribe to, the result is the same. The act was done, the impossible had been achieved, the perfect prince was gone, replaced by a terrible breathing paradox. The assassins, their work complete, tried to flee. We know that some were caught. The ringleader, Alecto, was imprisoned in an Evergale. Others were killed, and their spirits bound to the service of Ranni's allies. But the damage was irreversible. This singular event, this Night of Black Knives, was the pebble that started the avalanche. It was the crack in the divine mirror. And the first, most immediate and most horrifying consequence was not the war, not the shattering, but the silent, awful thing that now lay in Godwyn's bed. The soulless, undying, perfectly preserved body of a god. A body without a mind. A blank page upon which a new and terrible story was about to be written. The assassins were gone, melting back into the shadows from which they came. The capital was silent, unaware that the axis upon which its world turned had just been broken. In a royal bedchamber, steeped in golden finery, lay the prince. But it was not Godwyn, not anymore. It was a thing. It was his body, yes, the perfect sculpted divine flesh of a demigod at his peak. It was warm. A chest rose and fell with a steady rhythmic breath. The heart of a god still beat, but the soul, the person, the consciousness that was Godwyn, had been scooped out as if by a spectral ladle. We can only imagine who found him. A servant entering at dawn, a royal guard checking his post, or perhaps Marika herself, already aware of the terrible deed. Whoever it was, their discovery was one of pure, undiluted theological horror. This wasn't a murder scene. There was no blood save for the dark, strange wound on his back. This was a paradox. The prince was dead. The prince was alive. He was a breathing, undying corpse. His eyes, perhaps open, would have been vacant, milky, and utterly empty, staring at a ceiling he could no longer comprehend. This was the immediate, horrifying result. This was the first life in death. The wound on his back was the core in-game fact that defined this new, terrible state, the Hallowbrand. It was the curse mark of death, the specific half of the great rune that had been carved into his flesh. It looked less like a cut and more like a void, a patch of darkness that seemed to drink the light, a black, root-like pattern that signalled not the presence of a new power, but the absolute absence of his soul. It was a brand of pure emptiness. In the Golden Order, the body was secondary. The soul was everything. The soul returned to the Erd Tree. It was blessed. It was reincarnated. It was part of the great eternal cycle. But Godwyn's soul had not been set free. It had been annihilated. It was gone. It could not return to the Erd Tree. It was not waiting in some glorious afterlife. It had been deleted from existence. Yet, His body, bound by the Golden Order's chief dogma, immortality, refused to die. The very gift of the Erd Tree, the eternal life Marika had established, had now become the instrument of her son's eternal torture. He was an engine running with no driver, a beautiful golden prison with no prisoner. He was, in the most literal sense, nobody home. The initial panic in the capital must have been less about war and more about contagion. The high priests, the scholars, the demigod family, they would have been brought in. They would have seen this thing. They would have tried their most sacred incantations. They would have poured healing flasks over the Hallowbrand. Nothing would have worked. How do you heal an absence? How do you bless a vacuum? They were witnessing a state of being that their religion insisted was impossible. It was a living blasphemy. You can hear the panicked whispers from the royal physicians. He's breathing, but the grace is gone. I don't think the manual covers soulless, immortal god corpse. Does anyone have the appendix for that? This is where a vital, obscure lore tidbit comes from, pieced together centuries later by the sorcerer Rogier. Rogier, in his desperate search for the truth of that night, dedicates his life to studying this phenomenon. He describes it not as a static state, but as an active one. Godwyn's soulless body became a vacuum that pulled at the world. It was a spiritual black hole. Rogier's own affliction, the black gloom that paralyzes him, is what he believes to be the aura of Godwyn's slumber. Even in this initial loss, pure state, before the grotesque mutation, the soulless body was already a source of corruption. It was emanating an anti-life, a spiritual sickness. It was a nothingness so profound that it began to actively rot the very concept of somethingness around it. This leads to a major community debate. What was the immediate reaction of Godwyn's family, specifically his mother, Queen Marika? We have no record of a state funeral, no public mourning, no grand monument erected at that time. The entire affair was immediately and deeply hushed up. One theory, the prevailing one, is that Marika's reaction was one of pure, system-shattering grief. She was the one who had established the Golden Order. She was the one who had removed destined death. She, in her hubris, had created the very rules that now trapped her favoured perfect son in this living hell. His immortality, her greatest gift to him, was now his eternal curse. The sight of him, this breathing, beautiful, empty shell, did not just break her heart. It broke her faith. It broke her mind. But another darker theory whispers that her reaction was not just grief, but guilt. This theory, which leans on her Numen Kinta Marika connection to the assassins, posits that Marika was complicit in the plot, that she allowed it, perhaps to create a catalyst to rebel against the greater will. But in this theory, she never intended this outcome. Perhaps she thought Ranni's plot would fail, or that it would merely wound Godwyn, but seeing him, her son, his soul, annihilated, she realised her cold divine gambit had cost her everything. Her horror was the horror of a chess player who, in a brilliant move, had accidentally murdered her own child. Whatever the truth, the result was the same. The Golden Order was in a state of absolute panic. This was a call everyone, page the gods, activate the divine panic button level of crisis. They had a living blasphemy on their hands, a symbol of their order's greatest failure, and it was breathing rhythmically in the royal palace. They couldn't show this to the public. You can't let the common folk know that the divine family's souls can be deleted. It's terrible for morale. So they did the only thing they could do. They hid him. They took the golden, soulless body of the prince and concealed it. But the damage was done. The impossible had happened. And for Queen Marika, this was not just a tragedy. It was a declaration of war. Her son's soulless body was the proof. The Golden Order was a lie. The Greater Will was a tyrant. And the Elden Ring, the very law of this world, was the instrument of her son's defilement. Looking at the vacant-eyed perfection of Godwyn the Golden, her grief, her guilt, and her rage coalesced into a single terrible resolve. If the system was the problem, the system had to be broken. The sight of her son, this perfect, golden, empty thing, did not just break Queen Marika's heart. It shattered her faith, her world, and her sanity. This was not the grief of a mortal mother weeping over a fallen child. This was the profound existential horror of a god seeing her grand design, her entire system of belief, curdle into an abomination before her very eyes. She had built the Golden Order on the promise of eternal life, of grace, of a world without the messy, chaotic finality of death. And here, in her son's bedchamber, was the result of her hubris. Her eternal life was a trap. Her grace was a cage. She had not abolished death. She had merely created an alternative to it, a state of being infinitely worse. Godwyn, her firstborn, her champion, was the living proof that her order was a lie. He was a prisoner of the very immortality she had gifted him. Every steady, rhythmic breath he took was an accusation. Every moment his soulless body persisted was a testament to her failure. The grief of a god, when it truly breaks, does not manifest as tears. It manifests as an earthquake. It manifests as a realignment of reality. And in that moment, looking at the hollow shell of her son, Marika's grief, her guilt, and her millennia of suppressed doubt coalesced into a single, terrifying resolve. The system was the problem. The Golden Order was the prison. The greater will, the outer god that enforced this tyranny, was the jailer, and the Elden Ring, the very instrument of this cosmic law, was the lock on the cell. She decided in that moment to break it. This is the central cataclysmic core in-game fact of the entire story. Queen Marika the Eternal, the vessel of the Elden Ring, the god of the lands between, lifted her own stonemason's hammer and shattered the very thing that made her a god. The opening cinematic shows us this, the sound of ringing steel, the spiderweb of cracks spreading across the golden runes. This was not a calculated political move. This was a scream of pure, undiluted agony. It was the ultimate "if I can't have my son, no one can have anything" act of divine despair. Of course, the community debate on this point is fierce. Was it truly just grief for Godwyn? Or was this a 4D chess move Marika had been planning for Iona? The evidence scattered across the lands between suggests a complex truth. We find obscure lore tidbits in the echoes of Marika, those spectral dialogues she left behind in her churches. In these, we hear a mind already in turmoil long before Godwyn's death. She says, "I declare mine intent to search the depths of the Golden Order." She questions the nature of her own godhood, the price of her own creation. She was already a heretic, already a doubter, already a prisoner on her own throne. The most poignant theory is that Marika was both a schemer and a grieving mother. She had been planning her rebellion for ages, looking for a way out, for a way to defy the greater will, but she was a god trapped in her own divinity. She needed a push. She needed a reason so profound, so personal, and so devastating that it would give her the strength to do the unthinkable. Godwyn's fate was that push. His soulless, breathing body was the final monstrous straw. It was the personal tragedy that finally fueled her cosmic rebellion. And in this rebellion, she was not alone. She was at war with the very being she was bound to, her other half, her second husband, Radagon. The game hints that they are, in fact, two halves of the same being, the ultimate divine schizophrenia. As Marika brought her hammer down, Radagon, the Lael Hound of the Golden Order, tried to repair the damage. You can almost picture it, the ultimate stop hitting yourself argument, but with the fate of reality at stake. A statue in Lendel shows their fractured, intertwined forms, Marika breaking the ring, Radagon desperately trying to hold it together. But her grief-fueled rage was too strong. The Elden Ring, the very lore of the land, shattered. It didn't vanish. It broke apart into its constituent components, the great runes, and these fragments, still dripping with divine power, were scattered. The greater will, the cosmic entity behind the Order, was displeased. Displeased is probably putting it lightly. It was the kind of rage that only an outer god can muster. This was high treason. This was deicide. Marika had not just broken a sacred object, she had broken the world. Her punishment was swift and terrible. She was imprisoned, crucified, impaled by a spear of golden light inside the Erd Tree, her own sacred symbol turned into her eternal prison. She was left to hang there, the broken, undying vessel of a broken, undying world. And her children, the other demigods, they were left leaderless. Their mother was imprisoned, their perfect brother was a soulless horror, and their reality was fractured. And what did they see? They saw the great runes, the most powerful pieces of the Elden Ring, just lying around. It was a divine Black Friday sale, and everyone was grabbing for power. This is what truly kicked off the war known as the Shattering. The demigods, each claiming a piece of the broken ring, began to fight among themselves for total control. This is the supreme, awful irony of Marika's act. In her grief for her son, she plunged the entire world into a war that would last for centuries. Her solution didn't save Godwyn. It didn't heal him. It just made the entire world as sick as he was. It was a lashing out, an act of pure despair. It's the divine equivalent of your computer freezing, so in a fit of rage, you throw it out the window. Sure, the program isn't frozen anymore, but you've created several new, significantly larger problems, and you still haven't fixed the original issue. Godwyn, the catalyst for it all, was now just collateral. His fate was forgotten. While his siblings warred over the scraps of their mother's broken lore, his soulless, undying body was taken away, hidden from sight, and left to change. The story of Godwyn was no longer about a prince. It was now about a plague. Marika's hammer strike was a scream of grief that tore the world apart, but the reason for that scream remained. While the demigods, her children, saw the broken runes as a call to war, as a divine inheritance to be claimed, the priests and theologians of the Golden Order saw something else. They saw the source of the problem. The Shattering was the macro crisis, the geopolitical nightmare, but back in Leyndell, hidden from the public eye, was the micro crisis, the ground zero, the thing that had started it all. Godwyn's breathing, soulless body was still there, and it was becoming a problem. This was not a tragedy they could mourn. It was a heresy they had to contain. His contagious absence was not a poetic turn of phrase, it was a spiritual reality. The Golden Order was, at its heart, a faith. It was a system of belief built on absolute, unshakable rules. The Erdtree is the source of all life. All grace flows from it. All souls return to it. It is the perfect, divine, eternal cycle. And Godwyn's body was a living, breathing, impossible exception to every single one of those rules. His soul had not returned to the Erdtree. It was gone. His body, which should have dissolved into grace, persisted. He was a living refutation of their entire religion. This paradox, this soullessness, was not a passive state. It was an active, spiritual contagion. Think of the Golden Order as a perfect, airtight system, and Godwyn's new state as a vacuum. Nature abhors a vacuum, and so does theology. His empty soul began to pull at the faith around it, creating a sickness of doubt. The priests who guarded him, who tried to perform their holy rites, would have felt it. Their incantations would have guttered and died in his presence. Their faith, their grace-given power, would have felt cold and hollow. He was a spiritual black hole, and he was spreading. This is the core in-game fact that defines the entire era, the creation of those who live in death. Before the Night of Black Knives, this concept did not exist. There was life, and there was the return to the Erdtree. But Godwyn, as Patient Zero, introduced a third horrifying option, undeath. His soulless state was a plague of the soul, and it began to leak. Other souls, instead of returning to the Erdtree upon death, began to get stuck just as he was. The dead began to rise not as mindless zombies but as lost, terrified, and corrupted beings. These were the skeletons we find in graveyards, the tibia mariners, the pale, wandering ghosts. They were all, in essence, Godwyn's children. This new reality horrified the Golden Order. It was an existential threat. They couldn't just fight it. It was a corruption of their own system. So they did what all rigid, terrified institutions do. They became fundamentalists. They created an inquisition. An obscure lore tidbit confirming this is found in the description of the golden epitaph sword, the one D, Hunter of the Dead, wields. It reads, "A sword, imbued with the light of faith." This was the first sword granted to the champions of the Golden Order who repel the soulless. They created an entirely new class of holy warriors, not to fight giants or dragons, but to hunt the soulless. They declared that those who live in death were the ultimate blasphemy, the ultimate enemy of the Golden Order. This is the tragic, biting irony. The Golden Order, in its desperation, declared holy war on the symptoms of a disease that originated with its own Golden Prince. The priests and hunters, in their gilded masks, would perform their rites, sanctifying the ground, but they were essentially just mopping the floor while the pipes in the basement, Godwyn himself, were bursting. It's the divine equivalent of putting a thoughts and prayers sticker on a ruptured nuclear reactor. This leads to a major community debate. How exactly did this spiritual sickness spread? Deathroot, which we will get to, is the physical vector, but this was a spiritual one. The most compelling fan theory is that Godwyn's state didn't just break the faith, it broke the rules of reality. By having his soul annihilated, he created a hole in the divine lore. He proved that the Erdtree's cycle could be defied, and in doing so he unwillingly opened the door for other souls to get lost. He was the first soul to fall out of the system, and his fall created a tear that others began to slip through. The faith of the Golden Order, faced with this undeniable proof of its own failure, rotted from the inside out. It became hollow. The priests in Leyndell, the very heart of the faith, would have been the first to catch this spiritual sickness. They were living a lie. They preached the glory of the Erdtree's return, all while knowing that the Queen's favoured son was trapped in a state of eternal, soulless limbo, hidden somewhere deep within the capital. This hypocrisy, this contagious absence of true belief, is the real infection. It's the rot that hollowed out the Order, leaving only a gilded, intolerant and terrified shell. Godwyn, the great uniter, the man who befriended dragons and brought peace, had now, in his victimhood, become the ultimate divider. His mere existence created the greatest schism in the history of the faith. He was the unworded, unspoken, unadmitted failure that the Golden Order was now forced to define itself against. They could not heal him. They could not kill him. They could not even look at him. He was their failure, their shame, and their deepest, darkest secret. And so, as the shattering war began to rage, as his brothers and sisters tore the world apart for scraps of power, the priests of the Golden Order made a decision. This spiritual biohazard, this breathing heresy, could not be allowed to remain in the capital. It had to be removed. It had to be buried. But where do you bury a god that cannot die? Where do you hide a secret that is poisoning the very air you breathe? You must take it, somewhere deep, somewhere dark, somewhere that, in a final, desperate and utterly tragic act of symbolism, represents the very system he broke. They had to hide him. The breathing, soulless blasphemy that was Godwyn the Golden could not remain in the capital. His presence was a spiritual poison, an unravelling of the very faith that held the city together. And so, as the shattering war began to rage above, as his half-siblings tore at the world like rabid dogs, a secret, second tragedy was unfolding in the silent depths beneath Leyndell. This was no funeral. There were no mourners, no eulogies, no grand procession for the fallen hero. This was a containment protocol. It was a hurried, panicked, and deeply shamefaced affair. We can imagine a small cabal of the Golden Order's most senior priests, their faces hidden by their gilded masks, and perhaps even Marika's other half Radagon directing the grim operation. They took the pristine, living but soulless body of the prince, not in a golden chariot, but likely on a simple, unadorned bier. They moved in the dead of night through secret passages, away from the eyes of the city descending. They went down, past the sewers, past the subterranean shunning grounds where the omens were kept, further and further down into the black, unrecorded history of the lands between. They were heading to the very foundation of their world. This is the core in-game fact that many players miss entirely, the existence of the Deeproot Depths. It is a vast, cavernous, and utterly alien world that exists directly beneath the royal capital, a place of giant, calcified roots, and a sky of shimmering, ethereal mist. It is the literal and metaphorical basement of the Golden Order. This was their desperate, final gamble. The priests, in their rigid, systematic faith, must have had a reason. This wasn't just out of sight, out of mind. It was a theological Hail Mary. Their logic, steeped in the Order's dogma, was probably this: the Erdtree is the source of all grace and all life. Its branches give the blessings, but its roots are the conduit. If Godwyn's soul has been disconnected, then we must take him to the very source. We will plug him directly into the Erdtree's mainframe. They believed that by laying his body at the very font of grace, the sheer, concentrated power of the Erdtree would overwhelm the soullessness, either rebooting his soul, or at the very least containing the spiritual plague he had become. It was an act of supreme, terrified hope. They carried him through the dark, past the waterfalls of spectral mud, to the very heart of the depths. There they found the Great Tree, the ancient foundational root system from which the Erd Tree itself had sprung, and they entombed him there. They didn't just put him in a coffin, they integrated him. They laid him at the foot of the greatest root, and in some horrific lost ritual they bound him to it, offering their fallen prince to the very heart of their god. And here they made their most terrible discovery. This is the obscure lore tidbit that reveals the true, rotten core of the Golden Order. The roots of the Erd Tree were not as pure as they believed. The Deeproot Depths was not a holy sanctum, it was a boneyard. This is where the Golden Order had buried its first enemies, the ancient gods and beings it had supplanted. The age of the Crucible, the primordial soup of all life, had been paved over, and its remains were festering in the dark. The priests in their panic had just thrown their new, radioactive heresy onto the pile of their old, forgotten ones. The Erd Tree, it turns out, wasn't a perfect divine creation. It was a parasite. It had grafted itself onto the ancient Great Tree, and its roots were not just conduits of grace, but of history, of all the dead, defeated things it had absorbed. This, of course, has sparked a massive community debate. What exactly is that thing we find at the bottom of the Deeproot Depths? When the Tarnished finally pushes through the dark, we don't find the handsome, sleeping body of a prince. We find a monstrosity, a colossal, mutated, barnacle-encrusted corpse fused into the roots, a grotesque parody of a merman with a serene, beautiful face and a rotting, fish-like lower body. Is that Godwyn? The most accepted theory is, yes, that is what Godwyn became. The priest's gamble failed in the most spectacular and horrific way imaginable. The Erd Tree did not heal Godwyn. Godwyn infected the Erd Tree. The soullessness, the Hallowbrand, was not contained. It was a void, and the life-giving grace of the Erd Tree, when it touched that void, didn't fill it. It curdled, it rotted, it mutated. The soulless flesh of the demigod, infused with the unchecked primordial life-giving power of the roots, began to grow. It was runaway, cancerous, undeath. His body, no longer constrained by a soul, just expanded. It merged with the roots. It merged with the dead things in the soil. It became a new, terrible, unliving thing. The beautiful face of the prince, the one thing that remained of his golden perfection, was a mask on a sprawling, mindless, ever-expanding tumour. It was a statue's head on a mountain of biological horror. The Golden Order's secret was no longer just a sleeping prince. Their secret was now a beast that was growing, a beast that they had, in their infinite wisdom, plugged directly into the circulatory system of the entire world. The burial was a catastrophe. They hadn't contained the plague, they had given it a highway, and this new thing, this monstrous fusion of a soulless god and the world's roots, was about to be born. It was no longer Godwyn the Golden. It was something new. It was the Prince of Death. The birth of the Prince of Death was not a sudden, violent event. It was a silent, creeping geological metamorphosis. It was a slow-motion nightmare unfolding in the forgotten dark, leagues beneath a world that was already tearing itself apart in fire and madness. The Golden Order priests, in their panicked act of burial, had not solved their problem. They had planted it. They had taken a seed of pure, soulless nothingness and planted it in the most fertile, life-giving and magically potent soil on the planet, the very roots of the Erd Tree. What happened next was a grotesque parody of a life. The Erd Tree's roots, sensing the divine flesh, did what they were designed to do. They gave grace. They pumped the raw, unbridled, primordial power of life into the soulless body of the demigod. But without a soul, without a mind to direct that life, to give it form and purpose, the grace had nowhere to go. It was pure, undirected, chaotic energy. It was like hooking a fire hose to a teacup. The life force, colliding with the void of the Hallowbrand, curdled. It festered, and it began to build. This is where a truly obscure lore tidbit offers a terrifying explanation. The Golden Order, as rigid as it was just one filter on reality. Before it, there was the Crucible, the primordial soup of all life, a time when life was a chaotic, swirling blend of all things: horns, tails, scales, wings, fur. The aspects of the Crucible incantations are a memory of this. This primordial power still exists dormant in the deepest roots of the Great Tree. Godwyn's soulless body, lacking the filter of an order-bound soul, became a gateway for this ancient chaos. His flesh, infused with this unchecked grace, began to devolve. It began to regress. It was not just growing, it was remembering the primordial crucible. His cells, with no instructions, began to revert to their most ancient chaotic forms. This is the most logical explanation for his horrific new shape. His legs, no longer told to be legs, melted and fused into a colossal fish-like tail. His skin, no longer told to be smooth, sprouted scales and barnacle-like growths. His body simply sprawled, becoming a cancerous, undirected, ever-expanding thing. It's like biological karaoke, but the only song it knows is Primordial Chaos by the Formless Ooze. And this brings us to the core in-game fact, the monstrosity we, the Tarnished, finally discover in the heart of the Deeproot Depths. The map calls it the Prince of Death's corpse, but it is so much more. It is a landscape. It is a pale, white and grey mountain of flesh, fused so completely with the roots of the Erd tree that you cannot tell where the tree ends and the prince begins. It's a colossal, sprawling, fish-tailed, clam-encrusted growth. It's so vast it has its own ecosystem of giant ants feeding on it. And then, there is the face. This is the part that lodges itself in your brain and refuses to leave. Perched atop this Lovecraftian nightmare of fins and roots is the perfectly serene, perfectly beautiful face of Godwyn the Golden. His eyes are closed. He looks to be in a state of beatific, peaceful slumber. This is the final, sickening joke. The only part of him that remains visually pure is the mask. It is the universe's most grotesque and tragic case of catfishing, where the profile picture is a golden-haired god, and the reality is a continent-sized, undead fish tumour. This serene face, this mask of peace on a body of pure chaos, is the ultimate symbol of his tragedy. A hollow, beautiful lie covering an unspeakable, mindless horror. This, of course, ignites a fierce community debate. Is this Prince of Death a conscious entity? The title Prince implies royalty, a mind, a will. Does Godwyn, in some form, rule over the undead? The overwhelming consensus, and the most terrifying answer, is no. There is nothing inside. It is not thinking in any way we would recognize. It has all the intellectual curiosity of a particularly ambitious fungus. Prince of Death is not a title he claims. It is the name the world gave to this new, natural disaster. He is a prince, in the same way a hurricane is a king, a title given to a vast, unthinking, and utterly destructive force. This thing is not a person. It is an engine. It is a mindless, soulless, biological factory. The curdled grace of the Erd tree mixes with the void of the Hallowbrand, and his body, this massive mutated flesh reactor, begins to produce something. It is no longer just a passive spiritual void. It is now actively exuding a physical, tangible, and utterly virulent substance. The spiritual plague now had a physical vector. The soullessness, this anti-life, was leaking out of his new body, out of the roots, and into the world. The burial was a catastrophe. The priests had not contained the plague, they had given it a womb, and in the dark, over the long years of the shattering, this new, mindless, monstrous Prince of Death incubated. His body grew, and as it grew, its pestilence began to seep upwards, to crawl along the very root system that fed the entire world. The secret in the basement was no longer just a secret. It was a leak, it was a contamination, and it was about to spread. The leak was on. The priest's catastrophic gamble hadn't just failed to contain Godwyn, it had weaponized him. The mindless, sprawling, ever-growing engine that was the Prince of Death, plugged directly into the root system of the Erd tree, was now in full production. It was manufacturing a product, a physical, tangible, and utterly virulent substance that was the perfect fusion of its two parts, the soulless void of the Hallowbrand and the chaotic primordial life of the Erd tree's roots. This substance was Deathroot. This is the core in-game fact that connects Godwyn's personal tragedy to the global pandemic we see as the Tarnished. Deathroot is the grey, root-like, spectral-looking gunk we find infesting the deepest parts of the world. It is not death in the way we understand it. It is not rot. It is not decay. It is unlife. It is the physical, cancerous growth of a demigod's soulless, immortal flesh. It is life without a soul, life without a mind, life without a purpose. It is a biological echo, a mindless, spreading organism whose only instruction is grow. And it's spread not by wind or water, but through the perfect divine superhighway that the Golden Order had so foolishly provided it. The Erdtree's root system, the very network that was meant to carry grace and bless the land, became the world's most efficient high-speed contamination vector. It was as if the entire world was running on a single secure server, and the priest had just given the world's most potent virus an admin-level password and plugged it directly into the mainframe. The Erdtree's roots reached everywhere, and so Deathroot began to sprout everywhere. We see it first in the quiet, forgotten places. In Limgrave, it pushes up through the soil in the death-touched catacombs, where a Tibia mariner, the world's creepiest ferryman, rows his spectral boat on a small underground lake of what exactly? Soupy undeath? It's not water, it's just cold. The mariner himself is a skeleton who summons other bigger skeletons, and he's drawn to this Deathroot like a moth to a flame. It's in Liurnia, in the Black Knife Catacombs, a place that is, appropriately, crawling with it. This links the plague directly back to its origin, the Assassins. It's as if the very act of their crime has permanently stained that place, inviting Godwyn's new form to take root. We find it in the Altus Plateau, creeping up from the depths, forming a dark, shadowy forest where the sun of the capital cannot reach. Here, the infection has taken on a new horrifying form, the Wormface. Oh, the Wormface. These are without a doubt the most unsettling, pants-wettingly awful creatures in the game. They are colossal, weeping, many-faced giants that shamble through the grey fog. They are covered in writhing, root-like tendrils, and their face is just a mass of these worms, which they use to spew the physical manifestation of Godwyn's suffering, Deathblight. This is the ultimate don't touch me status effect. It's not just poison, it's anti-life, a fog that, if it builds up, causes massive grotesque spikes of that same Deathroot to erupt from your body, killing you instantly. This, of course, has sparked one of the most intense community debates. What are the Wormface? Are they people who are corrupted by Deathroot? Or are they, in some horrifying, literal sense, part of Godwyn? The most tragic and popular theory is that they are the latter. They are not just infected by the Prince of Death, they are the Prince of Death. They are his remote, ambulatory, weeping limbs. They are the physical, mindless, agonizing echo of his murdered soul. He has no voice to scream, so the world screams for him. The Wormface are his grief, his agony, and his loneliness given form. A walking, blighting, miserable symptom of the god tumour festering at the world's core. This infection is not just a passive blight. It is an active force. It is rewriting the rules of the afterlife. An obscure lore tidbit from the Eclipse Shotel confirms this. The weapon, found in the cursed fortress of Castle Saul, says it was given to the soulless demigods valets who wished to be born anew in death. This is a bombshell. Godwyn's soullessness became a new religion. It became a new god. The soulless demigod is Godwyn, and his valets are those who worship this new mindless force. They see undeath not as a curse, but as a rebirth. This is the true, insidious nature of the Deathroot. It doesn't just contaminate the dead, it claims them. It offers them an alternative to the Erdtree. Instead of returning to the Golden Order's cycle, their souls are pulled into this new, cold, soulless system. They are born anew in death, becoming the skeletons, the wraiths, and the other undead legions that now plague the lands between. They are all, in a very real sense, the children of the Prince of Death, animated by the mindless, spreading echo of his own soulless immortality. The world was now fundamentally broken. The Golden Order's promise of eternal life and a clean, tidy soul recycling program was shattered. Now, when you died, it was a 50-50 shot. You might go to the Erdtree, or you might get snagged by the cold, growing, mindless consciousness of Godwyn, pulled into his dark, silent kingdom. The very ground was sick. The air in the deep places was thick with the scent of this cold, grave-like infection. And the dead no longer stayed put. Godwyn, the golden hero, the ultimate victim, had become the unintentional father of a new monstrous race. The plague had a vector, the Deathroot, and now it had a populace. The dead of the lands between, no longer guided by the Erdtree's grace, were being pulled into this new, cold and silent alternative, They became those who live in death. This is the official, terrifying moniker for Godwyn's unintentional children. They are the single greatest symptom of the world's sickness, a new, rival civilization born from the corpse of a single, murdered soul. What are they exactly? They are not the mindless, flesh-hungry zombies of other tales. They are a theological horror. They are beings who have died, but whose souls, instead of returning to the Ertelry, have been snagged and reanimated by the cold, soulless grace emanating from the Prince of Death. This anti-grace anchors their souls to their own decaying corpses. They are not mindless, they are lost. They are conscious in a way, but their consciousness is now defined by a cold, hollow absence, an echo of the void in Godwyn himself. This is the core in-game fact that gives this new race its shape. The Tibia Mariners. We find these skeletal hooded figures sailing their spectral boats on small misty ponds in the most godforsaken corners of the world. They are the ferrymen of this new broken afterlife. They are the conductors of the soulless. When we approach, they don't attack directly. They ring their little bell and their children, the skeletal militias, rise from the earth. These mariners are the priests, the shepherds of Godwyn's new cold flock. They are the ones who usher the dead into this new reality, a reality where death is not an end, but a state of being. This new existence even has its own church, its own heretical doctrine. An obscure lore tidbit confirming this is found on the item Rosus's axe. The description reads, "A ritual axe used by the heretical Church of the Valley. The priests of the church, called the Ministers of Rosus, administer the sacrament of the bud. This bud is the Deathroot. This isn't just a random plague, it's an organised religion. There are heretical priests actively spreading the Deathroot, feeding it to the dead, administering it as a holy sacrament. They worship this new state. They see it not as a curse, but as a rebirth in death, a holy communion with their prince." This, of course, has sparked one of the most profound community debates. Are those who live in death evil? The Golden Order certainly thinks so. The Order, in its fundamentalist terror, created the Hunters of the Dead, like D and Gurrank, to eradicate them. They see them as an unholy, unclean blasphemy that must be put to the torch. From the Order's perspective, these beings are a rival faith, a direct threat to their monopoly on the afterlife. It's the ultimate holy war, a war for the very souls of the dead. But from the perspective of the undead themselves, the theory is that they are not evil at all. They are just other. They are the victims of a broken system, just like Godwyn. They are the first citizens of a world free from the Ertry's rigid cycle. In a dark, twisted, and utterly unintentional way, Godwyn's death achieved Ranni's goal. She wanted to free souls from the tyranny of the greater will, and now thousands of souls are free, just not in the moonlit, enlightened age she envisioned. They are free to exist in a cold, dark, and silent kingdom of their own, huddling around the memory of a dead god's soullessness. Godwyn, in all this, remains the silent, unthinking source. He is not their king. He does not command them. He is not a lich king sitting on a frozen throne, plotting the world's downfall. He is their son. A cold, dark, unthinking son. They are a new ecosystem of life that has spontaneously generated around this new, strange, deathly star. They are his children, in the same way that mould is the child of a dark, damp basement. They are a spontaneous, mindless generation created by the conditions he exudes. They are a civilization of echoes, a kingdom of the hollow. His tragedy, therefore, is no longer his own. It has been pluralized. His singular, personal torment has been amplified a millionfold, giving birth to an entire race of beings defined by his own hollow state. He is the father of a nation of the undead, and he doesn't even know it. His body, buried in the dark, has become the grotesque womb for a new, cold form of life. The Golden Order's response was, naturally, to just hit it harder. Their holy warriors, the champions of Order healing, developed incantations specifically to put them to rest, to force them back into the Erdtree's cycle. But it was like trying to scoop water out of a boat with a gaping hole in the bottom. For every skeleton they cured, Godwyn's roots produced 1,000 more. His infection was now systemic. It was a part of the world. It was a new, permanent feature of the lands between. And it was still growing. The infection wasn't just in the deep, dark places anymore. It was now beginning to show its face in the most unexpected and most horrifying of places. The Deathroot spread, the undead rose, and the world learned to live with this new cold reality. The war of the Shattering raged on, a loud, fiery and bloody distraction, while the true catastrophe unfolded silently beneath the soldiers' feet. The plague of undeath became just another horror in a world full of them. It was easy, perhaps, for the people of the lands between to compartmentalize it, to see the skeletons and tibia mariners as a new normal, a byproduct of a broken age. But Godwyn's tragedy was not content to remain in the deep, dark places. It was not content to be an abstract theological problem. It had to show its face, and it did, in the most unexpected and horrifying of places, Stormveil Castle, the fortress of the most pathetic and depraved of the demigods, Godric the Grafted. When we, the Tarnished, first fight our way into Stormveil, it's a fortress of madness. It's a cacophony of howling wind, shrieking eagles, and the wet, sloppy sounds of grafting. Godric, the runt of the golden lineage, is obsessed with power, and his method is to literally stitch the parts of stronger warriors, and anyone else he can get his hands on, onto his own wretched body. The entire castle is a testament to this depravity, a charnel house of discarded limbs and failed experiments. We push past the main gates, past the grotesque chimeras of grafted scions, and we find a quieter, darker part of the castle, a place that feels wrong. It's a deep, dark pit, a place of offal and refuse. It seems to be the castle's sewer, its dumping ground, where Godric throws his misbegotten, the failures of his experiments. And as we descend into this pit, the air grows cold. The familiar, sickly grey-white of Deathroot coats the walls, and then we see it. This is the core in-game fact that sears itself into the player's memory. In a vast, dark cavern beneath the foundations of the castle is a face. It is a colossal, pale, grotesque visage, the size of a giant fused into the rock and roots of the earth. It is swollen, rotted, and its eyes are open, milky, and staring into the blackness. And despite the rot, despite the nightmarish context, it is recognizable. The serene, noble features, the trace of golden hair now turned to pale, root-like tendrils. It is the face of Godwyn the Golden. This is not his body. His main body, the Prince of Death, is miles away, fused to the Erdtree in the Deeproot Depths. This is a symptom. This is a growth. It's a Godwyn polyp, a remote, cancerous echo of the main tumour. The Deathroot, spreading through the world's root system, has coalesced here, in this pit of misery and discarded flesh, and it has grown a face. It has grown his face. It's as if the plague itself has a calling card, a brand, and it has chosen the perfect, serene, and beautiful face of its origin as its logo. And this is not a coincidence. This is where a crucial, obscure lore tidbit clicks into place. The sorcerer Rogier, the one who has been studying the Knight of Black Knives, is here. We find him in the chapel at Stormveil, not by chance, but on a mission. He is the one who tells us about this place. He has found this face. He has been studying it, and his proximity to it is what is killing him. The black gloom that has paralysed his legs is, in fact, deathblight, contracted from this very spot. This face is not a dead, inert thing. It is active. It is a localised nexus of the plague, and Rogier, in his quest for truth, has been fatally poisoned by it. This raises the most disturbing community debate of all. Is Godric aware of this thing under his castle? Is he feeding it? The theories are chilling. The grafted scions and Godric's own obsession with grafting are a grotesque parody of the Golden Order's attempts to graft the Erdtree onto the world. Godric, in his depravity, is throwing his misbegotten servants, the living and the dead, into this pit. Is he sacrificing them to this thing? Does he, in his pathetic, twisted mind, believe this god corpse is the source of his power? The most compelling theory is that this face is a literal graft, that the Deathroot, the Prince of Death's essence, has grafted itself onto the foundations of Stormveil, feeding on the misery, death, and discarded flesh that Godric provides. The castle, just like its lord, is a rotting, stitched-together thing with a festering, monstrous secret at its core. The final proof of this face's active, virulent nature comes if we, the Tarnished, are brave or foolish enough to approach it. As we get close, a new horror erupts. From the body of the face, a monstrous black skeletal dragon-like thing bursts forth, an ulcerated tree spirit. This is not a random monster. The tree spirits are creatures of the Erd tree, but this one is black, rotting, and corrupted by deathblust. This face, this Godwyn polyp, is not just a passive echo. It is a womb. It is a nest. It is an incubator for the horrors of the new deathly age. It is taking the pure, graceful spirits of the Erd tree and birthing them anew as monsters, all from the grotesque, rotted echo of Godwyn's own face. This is the moment the tragedy becomes visceral. We can talk about spiritual plagues and soulless kings, but this is a physical, tangible, unavoidable horror. Godwyn, the golden hero, the most beautiful and perfect of the demigods, is now a face-shaped tumour sprouting from the world's sewage system. His image, his very likeness, is being used as a mask for a monster's nest. It is the ultimate desecration. His perfection, the very thing he was murdered for, is now the recurring, spreading, cancerous brand of the plague that bears his name. His face is no longer his. It belongs to the rot. And it is a rot that has a purpose that one very dedicated, very strange woman would soon try to fulfill. The world was sick. The plague had a source, the Prince of Death, a vector, the Deathroot, and a populace, those who live in death. It even had a face, the cancerous, weeping visage beneath Stormveil Castle. The Golden Order's response was one of violent head-in-the-sand denial, sending out their hunters to purge the symptoms while ignoring the cause. But this plague, this new, cold reality, would not be solved by fire and steel. The half-death was a theological problem, and it would require a theological solution. That solution would come not from a holy warrior or a wise king, but from a quiet, pale woman who offered to hold us in her arms. Fia, the deathbed companion. Fia is one of the most mysterious and tragic figures in the entire Pantheon. This is the core in-game fact of her story. We meet her in the Round Table Hold, a sanctuary, and she offers us an embrace. She calls us brave tarnished and asks to hold us, just for a moment. If we accept, she gives us the Baldachin's blessing, an item that boosts our poise. It's a moment of rare, quiet tenderness in a world of constant violence. But her embrace has a secret. It also gives us a debuff, a slight reduction in our total health. This is the perfect metaphor for Fia herself. Her comfort is genuine, but it comes at a cost, for she is a carrier of a strange, cold, and deathly purpose. She is a deathbed companion. This is her sacred duty. But what is that? An obscure lore tidbit found in the description of her deathbed gown explains the role of her ancient and heretical order. They were women who, in a time before the Erdtree, would guide the dead. Their most sacred rite was to lay with a champion, to lie with a noble hero who had died, that they may be reborn in death. This was an old, dark, and deeply misunderstood practice. The Golden Order, with its denial of all things death, saw Fia's order as distasteful, unclean, and heretical. They were the Goths at the all-gold-everything party, and the Order hated it. But Fia believed. She was not just a comforter, she was a priestess. She believed that death was not an end, and not a thing to be purged, but a state to be guided, to be comforted, to be loved. And then, the ultimate champion, Godwyn the Golden, suffered the ultimate unguided death. He was not just dead, he was half dead. He was a champion left in a state of eternal soulless torment. The Golden Order saw him as a monster, a secret, a shame. Fia saw him as the most noble, most tragic champion of all, the one who needed her rights more than anyone in history. Her purpose was not just to comfort the dead, it was to save the first of the dead. Her entire quest is to find her Lord, her poor sweet Lord as she calls him, and perform the ultimate deathbed companion rite. She wants to mend the half-death. She's the only person in the entire world whose reaction to Godwyn's fate is not terror, not violence, not political scheming, but compassion. This, of course, ignites a fierce community debate. What is Fia actually trying to do? Is she a noble saint, a tragic lover, or a delusional fanatic? Her questline is one of the strangest. She asks us to help her. She must find the other half of the Hallowbrand, the curse mark of death that Ranni cast away with her own flesh. Fia needs this. not to kill Godwyn, but to understand him, to commune with him. She leaves the Round Table Hold, a fugitive from the Golden Order, and travels to the ends of the earth. Her journey finally takes her to the one place everyone else has forgotten, the Deeproot Depths. She finds the colossal, monstrous, fish-tailed thing that is the Prince of Death's corpse. And where we see a Lovecraftian nightmare, Fear sees her champion. In an act of either supreme faith or supreme madness, she lies with the monster. She embraces the colossal, unliving god tumor, and she enters its dream. She communes with the last fading silent echo of Godwyn, the memory of the soul that was annihilated. Her goal is to conceive a god. This is not a physical child, it is a theological one. She's trying to birth a concept, a new rune that can fix the broken system. And in the heart of that cold, silent dream, she succeeds. She conceives, and we, the Tarnished, find her lying asleep on the monster, having given her life to create the mending rune of the Prince of Death. This is her tragic purpose. This rune, if we choose to use it, creates the Age of Duskborn. This is Fear's cure for the world. It is an ending where those who live in death are no longer hunted. They are accepted. They are made a natural part of the world's cycle. The mending rune embeds the principle of life within death into the Elden Ring. It's a somber, grey, misty and cold ending. It's an age of dusk, where there is no more bright golden fanatical day and no more absolute terrifying night. Fear's tragedy is that her compassion, her empathy, which is the only real love Godwyn ever receives after his death, is the very thing that champions the plague he created. She doesn't cure the disease, she just gets the whole world to accept it. She's the ultimate radical protester who, instead of getting the toxic waste dump shut down, manages to get it rezoned as a public park. She is, in the end, the only person who ever truly tried to help Godwyn, and in doing so, she ensures that his cold, hollow, soulless tragedy becomes the new, eternal, and universal law of the world. She gives him peace, at the cost of the world's warmth. Fear's solution, her Age of Duskborn, is, in its own way, the final and most profound testament to Godwyn's tragedy. His fate was so absolute, so world-breaking, that it could not be cured. It could only be normalized. It had to be written into the very laws of reality, a permanent cold and somber scar on the soul of the world. But this very idea raises a question. The Lands Between, let's be honest, is a tragedy buffet. Every major figure has a story sad enough to fuel a dozen mournful ballads. It's a suffering contest, and in the Lands Between, the competition is stiff. This brings us to one of the most constant community debates in the entire lore. Who is the most tragic demigod? The two main contenders, besides Godwyn, are always the Caelid twins, General Radahn and Malenia, the Blade of Miquella. Their fates are undeniably horrific. But it is the nature of their suffering, when compared to Godwyn's, that proves why the Prince of Death's story is the one true, bottomless tragedy. Let's first consider General Radahn, the conqueror of the stars. He was a demigod of such immense power and nobility that he learned gravity magic for the most sentimental of reasons, to continue riding his beloved but comically small horse. He was a warrior, a general, a true lion of the Golden Order, and in his epic world-shattering duel with his sister Malenia, she, in a final desperate act, unfurled her flower, releasing the full apocalyptic power of the Scarlet Rot. It didn't just poison him, it destroyed Caelid, turning it into the festering red-skied hellscape we know. The rot consumed Radahn's mind, leaving him a feral, mindless beast, a colossal, roaring cannibal, who still wears his full, magnificent armour. It is a terrible, terrible fate. He was the greatest warrior of his age, and now he is a monster, senselessly eating the corpses of his own men on a desolate battlefield. And yet, he is not gone. This is the core in-game fact that changes everything. Even in his madness, he's still holding back the stars. His mastery of gravity magic, the very thing that defined his greatness, persists. He is a broken-minded, feral beast, yes, but he is still, on some deep instinctual level, Radahn. He's still performing his self-appointed duty. He's a thing that does. He is the world's angriest, most rot-eaten bouncer, keeping the entire cosmos stuck in the VIP line. He has a will, however primal. He has agency, However broken, he is a being driven mad. Now, let's look at Malenia, the Blade of Miquella. Her tragedy is, perhaps, even more personal. She was born with the scarlet rot, an outer god's curse, festering inside her from her first breath. Her entire life has been a constant, agonizing, and ultimately losing battle against her own body. The rot has consumed her limbs, her sight, and her pride. She's a goddess of unalloyed gold, trapped in a shell of decaying cancerous flesh. Her tragedy is the struggle. She is a prisoner of her own power, and her one purpose in life, to protect and wait for her brother Miquella, is the only thing that keeps her going. It is a profound Shakespearean tragedy. And yet, she is still Malenia. She is in fact painfully aware of who she is. She has a consciousness, she has a will, she has a name, and she will make damn sure you hear it. I am Malenia, Blade of Miquella. She says it every single time she kills you, just in case you forgot. We get it, Malenia. You're very accomplished. Please stop one-shotting me. Her tragedy is the pain of maintaining her identity. She is a person in agony, and this brings us back to Godwyn. Radahn is a being driven mad. Malenia is a being in pain. Godwyn is a vacuum. He is an absence. His tragedy is not struggle, it is erasure. He has no mind to go mad. He has no consciousness to feel pain. He has no will to hold back the stars or wait for a brother. He is not fighting a curse. He is the curse. Radahn and Malenia are still characters in their own stories. Godwyn is the story. He is the setting. He is the weather system of undeath that has settled over the entire world. He has no agency. He has all the purposeful intent of a leaky faucet. He is not a he anymore. He's an it. He is a divine, mindless, spreading compost pile. This is a fate worse than madness. It is the fate of non-existence, and it gets worse. An obscure lore tidbit from the Eclipse Hotel reveals that other cults sprang up around him, separate from Fears. In Castle Sol, Miquella's valets of the soulless demigod wait for a magical eclipse, one which they believe will finally grant their lord a true death, a death of the body. Godwyn's fate is so terrible that the kindest, most merciful thing his followers can think of is to find a way to finally kill his body, to end the horrific, mindless biological process that he has become. This is the final, unassailable argument. Malenia's tragedy is hers. It spilled out and ruined Caelid, yes, but she is the one suffering. Radahn's tragedy is his. He is the one trapped in that monstrous body. Godwyn's tragedy is everyone's. His curse isn't a personal affliction, it's a global pandemic. His soullessness leaked out and rotted the entire afterlife. It infected the world from the roots up. It spawned a new, cold, hollow race. It created the death blight that rots the very earth. It birthed the monsters in the dark. Malenia and Radahn are victims of their own terrible fates. Godwyn is the terrible fate. He's not a character in the tragedy. He is the tragedy. His fall was not from grace to madness. It was from everything to nothing. And in that nothingness, he became a new, terrible something that would poison the world forever. His fate, then, is not a story in the way Radahn's or Malenia's is. Theirs are stories of struggle, of identity, of a heroic, tragic present. Godwyn has no present. He is not a person. He is a condition. He is a global, environmental, and theological problem. He is the spreading, eternal nightmare that the lands between can never, ever wake up from. Because his tragedy is not just that he fell from the greatest height to the deepest low, from the Golden Prince to the soulless, mindless thing in the dark. His tragedy is that his fall never stopped. It is still happening, and it will never end. The Prince of Death, the colossal, grotesque, fish-tailed monster fused to the world's roots, is not a static corpse. It is growing. It is an active, mindless, cancerous engine, and it is still producing. This is the ultimate, horrifying, core in-game fact of his existence. We find evidence of this in the items his new body continues to bud, like a diseased tree. This brings us to a truly grotesque and heartbreaking, obscure lore tidbit, the Prince of Death's cyst talisman. The description reads, "A bulging, scarlet-tinged cyst. It is said to be a nascent great rune, or perhaps it is a faint memory of the child that Godwyn the Golden never had. Let that sink in." the soulless, mindless biological process that is Godwyn's body, is still acting out a grotesque, horrific parody of the life he lost. He was the golden heir, the one who would have continued the royal line, and now his flesh, in its uncontrolled, chaotic growth, is spontaneously generating tumours, scarlet-tinged cysts that are a faint memory of the children he can never have. He's not just dead, his unliving body is mocking his own lost legacy. This is the eternal, spreading nightmare. It is a fate so absolute that it cannot be fought, it cannot be defeated, and it cannot be cured. The only solution the game offers is not a cure at all. It is a surrender. This is Fia's solution, her mending rune of the Prince of Death. If the Tarnished chooses this path, we do not heal Godwyn. We do not restore his soul. We do not even kill his monstrous body. We simply accept it. We take this new, cold, hollow reality and we embed it into the very fabric of the world. We make his plague the new law. This, of course, is the final agonizing community debate. Is the Age of Duskborn a good ending? Fia's followers, the proponents of this new cold faith, would say yes. It is an age of compassion. It is an age where those who live in death are no longer hunted as blasphemies. They are accepted. They are normal. It is a world without the Golden Order's harsh, intolerant, and ultimately false light. It is an age of peace. But what a kind of peace. It's a cold, grey, misty peace. It is the peace of the grave. It is an age where the warmth of life is forever duskborn, forever tinged with the cold, hollow soullessness of Godwyn's state. This is the ultimate final proof of his tragedy. The best-case scenario for the entire world is to share in his tragedy. The only happy ending is for everyone to become a little bit like him. He's so completely, fundamentally broken that the only way to fix the world is to break the world to match him. And if we don't choose Fia's ending, if we become the Elden Lord of a new fractured age or a new age of order, what happens to Godwyn? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. He is still down there. The Prince of Death is still fused to the roots. He's still growing. His body is still budding its cancerous children. The Deathroot is still spreading. The Tibia Mariners are still rowing. The Wormface are still weeping. We, as the new Elden Lord, simply ignore him. We build our new Golden Kingdom right on top of the basement where the God Tumor is festering just as Marika did. That is why Godwyn's death is the most tragic story in Elden Ring, because it is Elden Ring. His tragedy is the foundational, unfixable, permanent sickness of the lands between. He's not a character who suffered a tragedy. He is the tragedy. He is the past that can't be undone, the present that can't be fixed, and the future that has been forever poisoned. He is the silent, sleeping, spreading nightmare, the golden prince who was erased, and in his place became a void so powerful it swallowed the world. Word count 1404. And that is where we must leave him. We must leave the golden prince to his terrible, cold, and unending slumber, fused to the roots of a world he inadvertently poisoned. It is a heavy, dark, and bottomless story, one that offers no easy answers, no glorious redemption, and no final, peaceful rest for its central victim. It is a true, unending nightmare. But that is a tragedy for the lands between, a story for a world of myth and magic, and not a story for this room. The only tragedy here would be to lose sleep over it, and we can't have that. So let the image of that dark, deep world and the cold, hollow prince just dissolve. Let it all begin to fade like a mist clearing at dawn. Let the complex, somber chronicle of the Golden Order and its profound failures just drift away, replaced by the simple, immediate, and comforting sensations of the room you're in. The only roots here are the gentle, quiet roots of your own approaching dreams. The only duskborn here is the soft, safe, and comfortable twilight of your own night. The story is told. The chronicle is now closed. There is no more tragedy to analyse, no more lore to uncover. There is only the soft hum of the fan, the weight of your blankets, and the quiet, easy peace of the night.